That smirking kid is Jose Preciado Alegria, one of the cartel's youngest hitmen, and he's bragging about wiping out an entire family, including a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old. The Peru cartels brutally wiped out rival La TOTA family and bragged on live. And what really happened that day is worse than anyone imagined. From paid executions in broad daylight to killers caught smiling on camera and a teen survivor forced to watch his siblings die, this case goes way deeper than revenge, and it's only getting started. They had just reached the red light. 3 cartel vehicles boxed them in at the intersection. Doors flew open, and several masked gunmen jumped out. They shouted something unintelligible to each other, and within 5 seconds, the bullets started flying. It was a planned execution, but this wasn't just about La TOTA, the infamous narco boss at the wheel. His wife, his parents, and all 3 of his children were inside the car that day. The youngest, just 7 years old, sat in his grandfather's lap. His 12-year-old sister rode in the back. None of them stood a chance that day. CCTV captured the moment in all its brutality. The cartels stormed the car with military precision. One of the gunmen even shoved his upper body through the back window and kept firing at point-blank range. It was a well-known strategy in the Peruvian underworld. And listen to what the only survivor said happened next.
And that's how the last one in the bag, the fat one, ran to get behind him and said, "Now I'm going to burn you all."
Imagine living with that memory for the rest of your life, playing dead while watching the rest of your family burn. Yeah, inside that blood-soaked vehicle, only one person made it out alive. The eldest son, Israel San Roman, 17 years old. He'd seen the shooters coming. Then, he'd seen his grandmother throw herself over him in a desperate final act of protection. Her body absorbed the bullets meant for him.
My grandmother was the one who gave her life for me because she hugged me and I had to play dead, right?
When Israel opened his eyes, his siblings were bleeding out beside him. His mother and grandparents were gone. His little brother was the only one still conscious, and he was talking to Israel. A lot of wisdom for a 7-year-old, and a haunting moment for his brother to remember forever. But that wasn't even the most haunting part. 5 seconds was all it took to end 4 generations of the San Roman Doroteo bloodline. And while Israel was left to pick up the pieces, the shooters did not walk away. They laughed, bragged, and one of them went live. Israel San Roman Doroteo, better known as La TOTA, wasn't some innocent family man caught in the crossfire. He was the fire. At the time of his death, La TOTA had over 30 open criminal complaints stacked against him. Among them, theft, fraud, trafficking, attempted homicide, and DV. Yeah, we like to romanticize people like Chapo or Escobar, thinking they were at least devoted family men. But history keeps proving that a violent man is violent in all contexts. La TOTA's rap sheet read like a war log, and that was just what was officially on record. Back in 2003, he was already locked up for petty crime. He got out with fresh ambitions, scaling his criminal empire. He built his own protection network, demanded monthly extortion fees from local businesses, and started enforcing his will with bullets, not threats. He became a one-man cartel, and just like every rising capo, he made enemies, a lot of them. It wasn't long before San Miguel turned into a battleground. Rival factions began plotting and trying to recruit TOTA's own people. In 2022, his car was sprayed with bullets. Luckily, he wasn't in it. TOTA then dodged multiple assassination attempts in the following 3 years. Then, his house started getting targeted. Here's this terrifying footage. The street surveillance footage even caught the 2 sicarios attempting the hit. However, La TOTA wasn't able to trace the order or make sure that the bullets stopped flying. That's when his family begged him to stop putting the kids in harm's way. His sister remembers, but La TOTA didn't listen. Maybe he thought he was untouchable. Maybe he believed blood ties made him bulletproof. He was wrong. Funnily enough, he was the only one in the wrong in this family. His wife, sister, kids, and parents all said the same thing. Their massacre was just a matter of time. What made things worse, and this is where everything really spiraled, is what La TOTA did behind the scenes. Police sources say he snitched on his own criminal allies. He sent rivals to prison and made backroom deals with authorities while smiling in the faces of men who trusted him. And in the criminal underworld, betrayal doesn't just get you killed, it wipes out your name. So he had so many enemies, the authorities couldn't even say who gave the order. But one thing was clear, his execution wasn't just a punishment, it was a performance, a message in blood to all those who think like TOTA. This was proof that this wasn't a hit gone wrong. The kids weren't collateral, but part of the plan, and the footage proves it. The police eventually confirmed La TOTA's kids were targets too. It was not an unfortunate accident that his whole family was there. CCTV confirmed the 7-year-old wasn't sitting in the back, he was up front, in his grandfather's lap. up, right in the line of fire, and yet the hitmen kept shooting.
It wasn't accidental because you can clearly see in the video that this man attacked them from behind because he put half of his body inside the car and shot them. He shot them however he wanted.
At first, investigators considered the possibility that maybe things got out of hand, that maybe the shooters just panicked. But then came the internal police report, and it changed everything. According to forensic records and scene analysis, the killers intentionally reloaded to finish off the children. They didn't even hesitate. They were sending a message. This is what happens if you snitch. But what they didn't plan for was that someone would survive, someone who saw their faces. The 17-year-old, Israel Jr., had blood on his clothes, trauma in his eyes, and every detail of the massacre seared into memory. While police were still processing the horror scene, he was already naming names. He knew who drove the cars. He even knew who fired first, and he remembered the one who smiled as he left the scene and promised to burn them all.
I recognize their faces. I have them in my mind, so I will never forget them. These criminals have ruined my life.
He also knew exactly how they pulled it off, what corners they came from, what the license plate looked like, and which killer leaned into the back seat to unload on his baby sister. Israel's eyewitness account gave the police what the CCTV alone couldn't: motive, identity, and emotional intent. He didn't just describe what happened, he understood all the details behind it. The ambush was power theater, and he was the last thread keeping his family's story alive. Within 48 hours, thanks to his testimony, investigators were on the trail, and one of the killers had already started cracking. The police didn't need weeks of investigation or some grand international manhunt. They had all they needed, thanks to Israel Jr., and within 48 hours, the first suspect folded like paper. His name was Jose Carlos Solari Pozo, known on the streets as Charlie. He wasn't one of the shooters, he was the getaway driver, but he wasn't just driving. He knew the plan, helped coordinate the cars, and watched as children were executed from meters away. At first, he played dumb, then the pressure hit. He told the officers every detail of the plan, and once Charlie gave up the names, it was over. Police stormed the homes of two of the shooters, Jose Preciado Alegria, 27, alias Josechito, and Fabricio Vera, 19, alias El Gordo. Both had extensive criminal histories: assaults, illegal firearm possession, and robberies. They weren't new to violence, just new to this level of infamy. And here's the part that will make your blood boil. When they were dragged into custody, the country expected fear, maybe regret. Instead, they got smirks. Yeah, he needed spelling it out. His younger friend, shockingly enough, had the same reaction. It was like these two were completely oblivious to basic human empathy, to the idea that killing is wrong, and the world noted they seemed to be having a little too much fun on camera. Not only there was no remorse on their faces, there was no hesitation either, not even an ounce of fear for getting arrested. If anything, they were proud of their newly acquired fame, and when the interrogation started, they laughed again. It was that moment, caught on video, broadcast across Peru, that broke the country's patience. People flooded comment sections, called for the death penalty. These weren't just hitmen now, they were los mataninos, the child killers. Both men tried to walk it back in court. They claimed they had younger siblings too, that they would not want them dead. Their lawyers tried to prove they had hearts, but the footage didn't lie. What the public saw wasn't two young men caught up in a gang war. They saw predators bragging after butchering a family and laughing on camera while the blood was still fresh. Their smiles faded once the sentence came down, but that was just the beginning, because the people who ordered this hit were still free. The hitmen may have pulled the triggers, but they were never the ones in charge. From the beginning, investigators suspected the San Román Doroteo massacre wasn't just a rogue cartel hit. It's how it goes in the cartel world. Criminal organizations are like pyramids. There's always a bigger fish, and when a big fish like TOTA goes, along with his whole family, it's clear this is not just a case of a 19-year-old leading a messy robbery. In other words, the hit was ordered from high above by two of the most feared names in Peru's criminal underworld, Loco Paul and Loco Franco. These men don't post on social media, they don't leave paper trails, but in Lima's construction industry, their names are gospel. These two run extortion rings, threaten developers, and tax illegal projects like mafia lords. If a company doesn't pay up, work stops. If a boss pushes back, their family vanishes. That's the game, and TOTA knew it, because because for a while, he played in it. He operated his own criminal arm, collected protection money, inserted himself into construction deals. But he was small-time next to Paul and Franco, and worse, he started stepping on their turf. That's when things escalated. The failed assassination attempts, the threats, the shootouts, and eventually, the decision to erase him entirely. Not just him, but everyone who shared his blood. But here's where things get murky. Yeah, the investigators couldn't link the attack just to Loco Paul or to one single motive. And here's what made this case even harder to crack. When Josecito and Fabricio were finally dragged into court, neither of them uttered a single word about their bosses. Even when asked directly, or when promised life in Peru's harshest prisons, both men kept quiet. Why? Because everyone in the system, from cops to journalists, knew the truth. Snitching on Loco Paul or Loco Franco means death. Loco Franco was literally known as the king of crime in Peru. Reporters mused that TOTA's killing was his style. In other words, the two sicarios knew whatever they had done to Israel's family would be done to them. These guys don't kill you fast. They make examples out of you. So in court, not one mention was made of the men who paid them. There were no crumbs for the police to follow. Even with public outrage, even with global media coverage, the masterminds disappeared from the narrative as if the massacre planned itself. But not everyone was buying the silence. A leaked intelligence memo from Peru's Ministry of the Interior revealed that both Paul and Franco were under active but discreet surveillance. The reason? Informants claimed they were restructuring their operations from inside the prison. Because, yes, both men are technically behind bars, but behind bars doesn't mean powerless. Not in a country where cartel money and influence can allow you to operate from anywhere. In fact, Loco Franco is believed to control his construction racket via encrypted calls and prison guards on payroll. And Loco Paul, he allegedly coordinated the entire TOTA operation from a private wing where he enjoys privileges no regular inmate gets, including visits from so-called lawyers who never bring paperwork. One internal report even suggests Paul had unauthorized leave the week of the massacre, essentially disappearing from custody for 48 hours with no explanation. The killers took the fall, the system played blind, and the puppet masters went back to business as usual. The killers of the San Roman Doroteo family were handed life sentences, but even that felt too easy for most Peruvians. These were mataninos. As far as Peru was concerned now, no punishment feels heavy enough when there's zero remorse. Plus, the king of crime and his best friend were still at the head of this hydra, leading a criminal organization like nothing. Still, the Peruvian government had to act, if only to send a message. So they sent the two sicarios to Chayapalca prison, the most isolated, brutal facility in the country. Chayapalca sits at 4,500 meters above sea level, nestled in the freezing Andes. It's known as the highest altitude prison in the world, and easily one of the cruelest. That altitude means it's cold, and yet there's no heat or running water in there. That altitude also means super thin oxygen. Many inmates lose their minds and end up in critical health within months. That's where Josecito and El Gordo were dumped, far from their neighborhoods, far from their cartel bosses, and far from any comfort. Still, look at this footage. You'll see the 19-year-old El Gordo still laughing AMD, mocking the whole situation as he's dragged in handcuffs. It's not defiance exactly, more like the smile of someone who hasn't fully processed what just happened. Or maybe he has, and this is what passes for coping in a world where grief, fear, or remorse are all considered weaknesses. But here's the hardest part. Israel Jr. still hears the gunshots in his sleep. His dad wasn't a good man. TOTA was a crime boss. It would be easier if he were innocent, if the whole family were just victims of mistaken identity. But this is one man's dirty empire coming back to crush everyone who ever loved him. After all, his loved ones begged him to keep them safer. That's the thing about cartel families. Even if you never touch a gun, never sell a pill, never say a word, you still bleed for someone else's crimes. The kids, the wife, the grandparents, they never touched the criminal underworld. And now they're gone because one man made too many enemies, and because in this world, family is currency. We've seen this before, so many times too. Pablo Escobar's kids spent decades being hunted, followed, and blamed. Narco children are born with a target on their backs, not because of what they did, but because of what their last name means to the system. And if they're lucky enough to survive the violence, they still spend their lives being chased by a past they never chose. That's the real sickness here. When justice punishes the innocent along with the guilty, when the system turns a blind eye to the masterminds, but keeps the pressure on a grieving teenager who lost everything. Israel Jr. didn't pick this life, but now he's stuck in it, a victim of both his father's choices and the state's failure to protect what mattered most. This shouldn't be normal, and it damn sure shouldn't keep happening.